This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Xcast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I'm Kurt North, and you are listening to coverage of minute 86 of the X-Files Fight the Future. This minute begins at 85 minutes as Mulder is instructed to find Agent Scully. The minute ends as the scene of the burning car begins to fade to white. To discuss this minute, I am joined once again by Xcast recurring guest Darren Mooney. Darren, it is our final minute together. We've got an explosive scene coming up as well. How are things over there? How are you doing? How have you found the Fight the Future minute journey?
It's great, actually. I was worried, ironically, says anybody who has actually listened to any of our discussions. I was worried we wouldn't have enough to talk about. I was worried that we kind of end up spinning wheels and not being able to fill the time. So I'm actually surprised at how much there is to discuss and how much fun I've had doing it. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute delight and great fun as well. And again, a fantastic project, actually. I think it's a wonderful idea to get everybody involved and to allow everybody to kind of have their say about, Fight the Future, which is obviously a huge moment in terms of the X-Files. So well done to yourself and everybody else in the Xcast for organising this. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo that with Tony as well. Thank you, Tony, for the idea. And thank you for inviting me on and for, guesting with... I was a guest for Tony early in the film's run. Obviously, I was asked to help with the show and host it and do the ones with yourself, Darren, which have been great. I've been kind enough to podcast with Katie Dole for a few times as well, and it's also been nice, as you mentioned, about different people being involved, so different people on the Xcast community within the Patreon age, with recurring guests that have come back on the show. We've had different voices, different opinions. We've also had, people like, as I say, mentioned a few minutes ago, that we've had people with a scientific background that have done that. Carl's done some amazing work with quizzes and stuff like that, which has become a staple for Carl's minutes, which has always been fantastic. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And what I do like about it as well is the difference on the way people approach it. So you've got likes of Kathy Glinsky, who is very much a shipper and all that aspect, and someone like us who are talking about the mythology and all that kind of thing, and and the various different people who have very different opinions. I think it's really been a really good project.
No, it has. And again, it's amazing how much there is to unpack, how many different ways you can look at it as well. And I think that's a testament to the show, a testament to the fan base as well, and a testament to the podcast. So I think well done to all three of you. But no, it really is. It's a fantastic project. I'm really, really, really glad to have been a part of it. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And as I say, if ironically, though, you could, and I'm not suggesting this by any means, you could do this all over again and just have different people on different minutes, and you'd have a completely different podcast. But I'm not suggesting that in the slightest.
Well, it's too late, listeners. You heard it here first. This is happening, Xcast 2021, baby.
Yeah, do it for the 25th anniversry. Have another one.
Oh, and now you've done it. Now it's set. Start the Twitter campaign. The future is now. Hashtag the future is now, or what can we do? It'll be like, Anyway, we'll figure it out. Fight the second. Do a second by second podcast.
No, that would be almost impossible.
Frame by frame, baby.
That would be amazing.
If you look at the well-manicured man's face now, you can see that John Neville is clearly thinking about his history as an actor coming up through the classical ranks. So we're going to talk about that for 15 minutes. We are. Yeah. I mean, this minute, this minute begins. I don't even know if I did this. This is how delirious we're getting. Because production value wise, just so people know, we may well have recorded this together, but that's one giant block. Apologies, Kurt.
Yeah, it's fine. This is when the best part of the show happens, when you get people delirious. Recording for it. It's all going good. So I don't know if I've done this, but I'll redo it again. So the minute it begins at 85 minutes as Mulder is instructed to find Scully, and it ends with the burning car, which fades to white. So we find Agent Scully, Well Manicured Man asks here, and only then will you realise the scope and grandeur of the project, even though I've just told you the full scope and grandeur of the project.
Which stretches back from prehistoric times to before the dinosaurs walked the earth to the point in the future at which the apocalypse will happen. I want you to know that the scope can still be even grander than that, and the only way for you to fully appreciate that will be to go to the Arctic, stare at a matte painting, possibly have some CGI, and watch the spacecraft fly off in the distance, like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Only in that moment will you truly understand the scale at which we're operating here. And I mean, I get it. Like, it's very, very literally, this is a blockbuster movie, and we're explaining how this works. Like, the well-manicured man, as great as John Neville is, talking about the history of the virus and the thematic purpose of the virus, does not compete with a cinematic reference to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know, I mean, that's scope and spectacle. And again, like the suspense which seems to be there for casual audience members to say, look, please don't zone out entirely during this exposition. The kind of like that only then will you appreciate the scope and grandeur line seems to exist primarily to say, look, you've had your meat, you've had your sort of vegetables, now you're going to have some fun stuff and some candy. There's going to be some pretty stuff coming up. Please stare at the screen. You can re-engage with us again. Don't look away from your popcorn for a second, kind of thing. Again, it's appeal to mass audiences and understanding that when you're making a blockbuster, you have to make these concessions. You're paying, you're trying to draw in. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I actually think it's really good. I think it's fantastic that the movie is as accessible as it is. You are welcoming in people who are, you know, choosing to see this over Independence Day or choosing to see this over Men in Black, for example. And so you have to offer them something. And I feel like that line is the movie effectively conceding, look, we did our deep dive lore stuff. We promise from here on out, it's just going to be straight Alien, Star Wars, Close Encounters, homages. We promise. Maybe a bit of The Thing if you want as well. We'll throw in that for free. Come on. Stay with us, guys. Stay with us. We're almost there. Come on. That sort of mood is basically what I get.
Yeah, and surprisingly, something deep in the ground again, which seems to be a recurring
almost like it's a metaphor. Yes,
exactly. Description. But now we are going around in circles. But that is literally the only line in that minute is find Agent Scully. Then we realise the scope and grandeur of the project. Go now.
I'm glad I went on for 5 minutes about it.
Yeah, exactly. But there is aspects to this. I mean, you know, we've got the rat scuttling across, which was a complete fluke, which works
apparently
really well.
Apparently a happy accident.
Really
again,
happy accident.
Visual metaphor, you say, eh? Visual metaphor.
But let's infer to that what you will, because the rat must have had. What do you think the rat's methodology was for that scene? Do you think it just wanted to get on? Do you think it was a fan of the show?
I'm just saying, look, the day the well-manicured man was having, that rat was really freaking lucky that its brains didn't end up splattered across the alleyway. That's what I'm saying. Like, the well-manicured man needed Mulder to get out of the alleyway to stick it to the smoking man and the rest of the conspirators. But that rat was that was just target practice. It's damn lucky that he was in the car by the time it went scuttling around. That's all I'm saying.
It was very, 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 very lucky. You know, it got so close it could have got burnt.
Yeah.
So anyway, but actually during that scene of go now, we were talking about Mulder's panic face. Mulder no longer has panic face anymore. He has kind of resolute, stoic kind of, you point a gun in my face, I'm just going to stand here. Even though that Scully's got 96 hours, 95 hours,
95 and
59 minutes and 32 seconds or something.
Are you staring at a vending machine, Kurt, when you say that?
I am staring at a vending machine.
Do you notice a pattern here, eh?
I do. I seek a pattern emergent here, Darren, and I need your help. But yeah, so he does kind of like just stare him down. He's like, go now, and well manicured man points that gun in his face. We've talked about this. You can talk about it again if you like, about the raising the stakes for having no stakes at that particular
like,
moment. It doesn't
the
seem like
well-manicured man going to shoot him in the face. Like, what does the well-manicured man think is going to happen here? Like, I mean, what is he trying to do when he's just pointing the gun at him? And again, one of the things that I really like about the sequence is, and I don't think it's intentional, but it kind of works that way, is because Duchovny is a tall actor. So any sequence involving Duchovny, he is probably going to tower over any actor.
he's
Neville
not as tall
is
as me. He's only I'm ever so slightly taller than him.
Okay, all right then. So maybe you should point a gun at Duchovny, huh?
Maybe I should have, yeah.
But I do love that the well-manicured man, John Neville, is not a tall actor, and the gun that he has is kind of, again, it's a dainty gun, which makes sense in terms of the character. In that presumably if the well-manicured man's going to have a gun in his suit, he's going to want something that doesn't ruin the line of it, so he's not going to have a hand cannon. But I do love the kind of weird imagery of the well-manicured man who has to like lift his arm slightly to point the gun at Mulder, which kind of like communicates very clearly that this is not going to end in a sequence where the well-manicured man shoots Mulder in the face, even though he seems to be suggesting that it might. So I think that the movie kind of gets away with it just a little bit along those lines. And I do love that the well-manicured man kind of treats Mulder like he's treating like an errant child. Where like you have the moment kind of, you mentioned the wonderful Mulder one-liner where it's like, why the upholstery is also already ruined. And it's just like, get out now. It's very much like I've heard that tone, and it's not from somebody pointing a gun at me. It's from, like, my parents when I was a kid throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
It's like, you will get down these stairs now, young man. There's a real kind of, like, you expect John Neville to throw in a get out of the car now, young man, kind of aspect to it, which I kind of think works really well and kind of plays off Duchovny's energy in the scene, where Duchovny's kind of this kind of almost kind of slacker figure. It's like, I want to get out now. Stop the car. I don't want to, this is not cool, man. This is not cool. And I feel like that's the energy of the scene more than, oh my God, you shot Mulder in the face, which is just not where the scene is going, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the actual scene itself, I mean, I'm actually going to be fascinating as we talked about the minutes coming up. When I listen to them, this scene, that first line is in the first 30 seconds, including the gun bit. We then have 30 seconds of the car exploding, and I'm going to be fascinated to see what the snow scenes are going to be like when there's like a full minute of just snow. That's what I'm really looking forward to. But we do have this explosion. We do have this, and for
production,
years,
baby.
But we've got production going everywhere. But I actually, for years, and this is how my brain kind of ticked into this, and I couldn't shake it. It's only after listening to the commentary, probably around the time that I watched the DVD. So for a good year, 18 months, maybe 2 years, I thought that the bomb went off and it was designed to go off, and he wasn't committing suicide. But it was, and I always wondered, I went, why, when Mulder shuts the door, does the bomb not go off? But then obviously it makes more sense if he's suicide, and Rob Bowman says that, and I'm like, oh, why did I think that?
Part of me feels really disappointed that we didn't get like a cut to inside the limo as like he's stirring a martini glass or something, just sort of going, whistling to himself idly as he picks up the phone to ring the C4 detonator. I feel like we missed a trick there, because again, like how exactly does it work? Did he rig up the car beforehand? Like what? Because again, that implies a weird level of kind of like planning that makes his murder of Kurzweil seem particularly mean-spirited. Because if he was always going to blow himself up anyway, it feels rather mean that he killed the driver, because presumably like what the driver was going to do was going to rat him out to the syndicate and therefore come back and kill him anyway, which isn't a problem if he's going to be literally blown up. And also killing Kurzweil, which again isn't a problem if he doesn't kill Kurzweil, if he's literally blown up. And again, you could say that maybe he was trying to stop the syndicate from figuring out that he told Mulder, what was going on. But like, I mean, the syndicate are really stupid. We've talked about this. The syndicate are not the smartest kind of people in the world. But Mulder suddenly shows up with a vaccine and the location of where Scully is shortly after the well-manicured man blew up in a spontaneous self-car bombing. I feel like you might be able to draw a causal connection between those two factors, even without the driver going, oh, by the way, the well-manicured man told Mulder everything that was going on. So there is a kind of a weird sense of this is just happening because you've had 3 minutes of exposition, so now you get an explosion, which I admire in terms of blockbuster storytelling, but doesn't always make the greatest amount of sense. I also love that on the commentary, Bowman has this discussion where he's talking about, like, so we had this kind of debate about how it was going to happen. We wondered whether or not it should... We thought he was going to die in the car, but we wondered whether or not it should be an explosion or an implosion. We decided it should be an explosion. And it's kind of amazing. Because part of me what is like, what do the Washington, D.C. Police Department think when they get a call?
I had the exact same thought about if a CSI Washington, D.C. police, that you find a guy shot in the head, a guy in the trunk, and a guy in the back seat.
Presumably holding a martini glass or something, one has to imagine. Like, it's like, I can't wait to hear how you explain this one. But it's like, because it's Washington, D.C. as well, right? So it's like it's the center of power in America. And that is not a quiet explosion. It's not like a silenced pistol. It's not like somebody getting thrown down the steps or kind of injected with strychnine or sort of like having a faked heart attack. Like, everybody within a block or two of that car heard what happened. It's you kind like, one imagines that, like, no matter how good your cover-up operation is, there's going to be at least some dangling plot thread from a really wealthy British man found dead in exploded limousine with body of gynecologist and also limo driver shot through the face. Like, part of me feels like there's a National Enquirer series just waiting to run on that. Like, there's a whole sense of, like, imagine what the press would do with just those elements together, without knowing anything about alien conspiracies or Mulder. I kind of, like, part of me wants to get that story. Part of me feels like there should have been a moment later on where Mulder picks up the National Enquirer and he's like, well,
I've got the story to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! But yeah, I mean that goes to the end of Well Manicured Man. If we're going back to being all serious again, the explosion is actually really effective. It's quite well shot. And again, going back to the music as well, I think the music ramps up at this point, and then the fade to white, which obviously fades into the snow thing. But there's also like an element of like fading to white. Just it's not something that's used very often. And I think obviously thematically it works quite well. And you're going from fire, hot scene to a freezing cold, area as well, which is interesting.
Well, white is also purity as well, because it gives you that sense, the well manicured man. And again, we joked about this idea of kind of like the very selfish definition of redemption, where it's like, oh, I could happily go along with the genocide of an entire people, but as long as I save my kids, that's what really matters. But I mean, outside of that flippancy, there is a sense the well-manicured man has made a sacrifice here. And to be fair, he makes a sacrifice to save Scully, which is perhaps a bit less, selfish than, Bill Mulder sacrificing to save his own kids specifically. But like, there is something in the well-manicured man, like getting that, for all our joking, for all our kind of riffing on this idea of kind of how absurdly constructed the whole, suicide drama happens to be, the well-manicured man getting redemption through death, and the idea of that whiteout, which again, and we talked about this back in the first minute, adding a nice sense of kind of symmetry to this run of episodes, the emphasis on film noir and the emphasis on darkness and blackness, and particularly in the way in which when the well-manicured man is introduced in the alleyway with Mulder, the way that he's constantly surrounded by blackness. You mentioned that wonderful sequence of the two of them getting into the car together, but that sequence where when the well-manicured man's walking the car, how Bowman makes a point to surround him with shadows and darkness, even though looking at the way the alleyway is lit leading into that scene, you'd expect to see the walls behind him. So you have this idea that he starts this sequence kind of like immersed in darkness and kind of like smothered by the darkness and swallowed by the darkness. And again, as much as we might joke about it, the murder of Kurzweil is arguably the darkest point in his character arc, because it's the point at which his hands get dirty. And again, we can argue about the plot mechanics that are necessary to get there, but thematically that makes sense, and in terms of character that makes sense as well. And then you have the idea at the end that he dies in this big flaming fireball, which in the middle of a DC alleyway, and again, nice sense of symmetry here, DC alleyways in terms of that contrast between, the corridors of power and like these actual kind of, run down, dilapidated, rat infested, kind of rodent infested kind of nightmares. But you have this idea that, he blows up in this big firestorm that lights up the alleyway. And again, Bowman frames it rather wonderfully, where you have the sequence of Mulder seeing the car explode, or Dave Duchovny's stunt double, and then you have Mulder's reaction to it with the lighting on his face and stuff like that, and then the fade to white, which kind of gives you this sense that the well-manicured man in his final moments, however hokey, ridiculous, and perhaps plottedly, absurd in terms of plot terms it might be, the well-manicured man in his final moments embracing the light or coming to the light, which again is nice visual storytelling and nice thematic storytelling, even if I'm not entirely sure it holds together in nuts and bolts. But I mean, again, blockbuster summer storytelling, you tend to forgive a lot of that, I think.
The only other thing in this minute that, as I say, the music soars, it's really interesting in that aspect, is Mulder's quite lucky as well that the bottle didn't break. That he does check it, doesn't he? So,
he does. Well, again, that's a nice, reassuring the audience as well. Because again, that would be a really, really, again, M. Night Shyamalan twist. It's sort of more like Rod Sterling kind of Twilight Zone twist, where it turns out he actually broke the vaccine after all that. So after all that exposition, he's like, damn it, I'm going to have to find another guy with a guilty conscience and a vaccine who's going to give me another mountain of exposition. And then that time I'll get further away from the car and it'll be fine. Don't worry, I've done it twice now. I'll figure it out.
Well, again, though, if Well Manicured Man did set all this up and this was pre-planned, you'd have thought that it would have given him a little bit more space. Then just go, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to end it now.
Again, that speaks to the Well Manicured Man as this sort of drama queen type character, where it's I'm going out, but it's going to be an opera. Is it Deep Space Nine where they have kind of the sequence where I think it's Odo and Bashir are talking about, if a Klingon kills you, they're going to write a song about it. And Odo's no, if they kill me, I want them to write an entire opera. Yes. You get the sense the well-manicured man's I'm going out and it's going to be a feckin' opera. It's going to be the Ring cycle of of kind of gratuitous kind of redemptive suicides. It's going to be amazing. You wonder how much C4 he put under the limo. Genuinely speaking, there's a point at which he was probably told one block is enough, and he's like, no, five blocks.
My God, 5 blocks.
Yes, my God. Wondering if asking his pyrotechnics guy if he can set it up so that he can get it to flip while it's in the air. And it's well, I'm afraid the physics don't work. That's why he's oh, fine, that's grand. What about doves? Can we put doves in the boot? It's we can put doves in the boot. Actually, on second thought, I'm going to be using the boot for something else. Maybe let's not put doves in the boot. Don't worry about that. Bad idea. We'll keep it that. But again, I do kind of like the idea of kind of Mulder, really not waiting for Mulder to get away, because part of me wonders if he kind of wants Mulder to see it. It's there's no point in this ridiculously, absurdly gratuitous spectacle if Mulder isn't literally awed by it. So fine, he can get literally that far before I detonate it and make him look at this, because there's no point in going out in a blaze of glory if, I'm just going to end up on the front page of the National Enquirer tomorrow morning, having been found in an alleyway with a dead gynecologist and a driver who got shot in the face.
I think that will draw, as I say, we've managed to draw out 30 seconds worth of explosion as much as we could. I hope that was an enjoyable minute, because it was, there's apart from an explosion and a rat, there's not much that goes on in this minute. And as I say, all the best. I think Marlene Stemme has got some of the snow scenes, so I'm looking forward to seeing how she gets around that. But Darren, thank you so much for coming on, and again, as I say, the top of the hour, the top of the minute there when we were talking about it before. So thank you very much. This says, as I say, this is our final minute. So thank you everyone for listening to us and putting up with us for these 11 or so minutes. I hope we've had a good time. We had great feedback on the earlier ones, so thank you very much for that. Which is always good to hear. Good to hear. But so with this being the last one, Darren, we need to talk about our social media and where people can find people. So where can people find you online for if they're wanting to hear more of you and what you're up to at the moment? Bearing in mind that this isn't going out for a few weeks. 26th of July, this will be airing. So where can people find you online?
You can find me online on Twitter at Darren_Mooney, where I'm constantly tweeting about movies and other nonsense. So you can give me a follow there. You can come yell at me, come shout at me, or just engage in conversation. I do actually try to engage with people on there when I can. It's actually generally quite okay. You can find me at the Movie Blog, which is where I write reviews and just whatever pops into my head. So you can give a quick Google, find Darren Mooney Movie Blog. It's a 0 instead of an O in the word movie because I didn't register fast enough. I also write at The Escapist, where I write 2 columns a week for In the Frame, which is is kind of looking at pop culture. So I've done a couple of things recently around things like, say, the Terminator movies, things like Batman movies, things like, say, Pixar and things like that. It's kind of been interesting in the pandemic where there's not too much new culture going on. So I've kind of had an opportunity to go back and look at kind of retrospective culture and look back at kind of nostalgia and look at like the general direction of kind of nerd culture in general, which has been really fun, really fulfilling, and I've really enjoyed that. I also co-host another podcast called The 250 with my good friend Andrew Quinn. I think Kurt was on earlier in the summer talking about The Truman Show, which was a really nice episode. Really, really liked that episode. Thank you very much for coming on and joining us. And the week that we are releasing this, and the week that you will be hearing this, is an interesting week on the podcast. So I think that the weekend beforehand, we will have released our episode covering the wonderful, the masterpiece, the sensational, the unforgettable Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez vehicle, Geely, with the wonderful Jen Gannon and Louise Bruton joining us for that discussion. It is notably one of the worst movies ever made, according to IMDb, but is it really that bad? You can join us for that discussion, which is kind of interesting. It goes into a lot of fun stuff. There's a lot to unpack there in Geely. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of really, really, really unsettling stuff. The well-manicured man has nothing on Geely, let's be frank here. And also then, the weekend afterwards, which will be the start of August, we will be covering Hachi, A Dog's Tale. We'll be doing a sort of a spiritual cleanse. The Lifetime movie starring Richard Gere as a man who forges an association with an adorable puppy. It is a feel-good movie, and one of the best movies of all time, according to IMDb voters. And for that discussion, we'll be joined by our wonderful experts on international cinema, and also the new Good Boy canon, Ronan Doyle and Jay Coyle will be joining us for that discussion. So we hope you will as well.
Excellent stuff. Well, again, thank you very much, Darren. Luckily, on this occasion, I don't know how we did it for the last one, but we were on for that 4 or 5 episodes of the Fight the Future Minute. We then had an episode of Millennium, and I was on the 250 as well.
That was quite a week.
That was quite a week that we had on air together. But yeah, so just this week for me, I don't think I'm on anything. I don't think we're in Millennium realm either.
No, I think we're off season
either,
at this point, are we? I think we're off season.
We're off season. Millennium will be back. The Time Is Now pod, which is the Millennium podcast, will be back in September. So that'll be coming in a couple of months, actually, with the wonderful Chris Knowles. He'll be kicking off season 3 with me, which will be really good. Yeah. And obviously season 3 has some elements that kind of equate to X-Files in some ways. The first couple of episodes deal with a plane crash for a start off. So we'll look.
They take it to the max, eh?
They do take it to the max, Fennig. Yes. But yes. So you can find me on there at the Time Is Now pod. That's the best place. I'm also on the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So. And that's you can find that at Jean-Luc Podard, which is a play on the Jean-Luc Picard. So at Jean-Luc Podard. I'll also will have had at some point in the very near future, in August, I will be releasing a new podcast, which is What's Past is Prologue. And that is a Star Trek podcast looking at the new Star Trek universe and how it infers and how it relates to the old Star Trek. So the first episode is going to be about the Borg and how the Borg are displayed in Star Trek Picard, but how it has actually gone through the seasons of Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Next Generation and various Enterprise and stuff like that. So that's my new podcast project, What's Past is Prologue. So that'll be coming soon. And finally, Shipwrecked and Comatose. We will have finished season 1 of the Red Dwarf podcast that I'm currently doing as well. That's at Red Dwarf Pod. And season 2 will be coming. And in August, there is a 3-part documentary series on the entirety of Red Dwarf. That's coming to the Dave channel in the UK. And we'll be covering those documentaries. So that'll be something I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're coming up with this new documentary. So that's where you can find me. And of course, on my Twitter handle, at rmuldrake, RMULDRAKE. So those are the best places to find me. As I say, I've got loads of work going on at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. Thank you for everyone for having us for the Fight the Future Minute podcast. And Darren, I've just got one thing to say to you before we go. And that would be, go. Go now. Trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
We've already got 3 versions, I think, haven't we? So
we've got Ace as well.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking just up to this episode. So we've got the Living Rimmer, a hologram Rimmer, and a backup hologram Rimmer. So we've already got 3 Rimmers. in the space of 6 episodes.
That's more Rimmers than many people would want.
Yeah, but it's certainly worth diving into, because as you get into, as you say, Ace Rimmer, there's a couple of versions of Ace Rimmer. There's
Evil Future Rimmer.
Without a mouse.
I don't know if I've ever heard Gaelic spoken before, but I don't think this man was speaking Gaelic.
I don't speak Gaelic, so I'm afraid I cannot speak to that. But given how absolutely obsessive Stevenson seems to have been in most other regards, I think he might have been speaking some form of gibberish.
Yeah, we've seen in this show, especially in One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing, some very horrific...
Yes.
And Herbie as well, actually, in the Love Bug. Lots of dialogue that is clearly made up language, supposed to be Chinese. So my bum was clenching a bit when I heard this supposed Gaelic, because I'm pretty sure it's not.
Free with this month's issue.
I decided to have a look to see if I could find that interview online anywhere, and I couldn't, but in my searching, the photo from that interview was collected on a website called thestrokesartilluminati.blogspot.com.
The Strokes are a bunch of overrated hacks, then?
No, they're actually Illuminati, apparently, according to this website.
I mean, that explains a lot, right?
They are the secret rulers of the world.
Yeah, I mean, current climate, that seems to be the work of the Strokes.
Yeah. Maybe that's all what was hidden in the album.
It's almost certainly.
New York City cops meant something else.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.